This video will not contain spoilers for God of War Ragnarok. It is a review discussion of the game, but it will not contain spoilers. No spoilers. No spoilers. Aiden, will there be any
No.
spoilers?
I heard there's no spoilers. None at all.
No spoilers, okay? With that being said, welcome to VGC's review roundtable of God of War Ragnarok. I'm joined by Push Squares, Aaron Bain. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Jordan.
Does it feel like to you that this game has been coming out for about 6 years at this point? Because it doesn't feel quite real that we're finished with it.
Yeah, it's a really odd one to actually have. It's the first game I think that I've been like this excited to play since The Last of Us Part 2 for me actually was the last one that you know, you're like counting down the days. So that was very much the case with this one. And like actually booting it up, I got like goosebumps. I was like, oh, I'm ready for this now. So yeah, it is quite wild to actually have it here.
Speaking of The Last of Us Part 2, it feels a lot like The Last of Us Part 2 in the sense that when talking about that game in a review form, there was so little you could actually say about it because it dealt in surprises so well. So that is something that's worth noting. You'll notice this in reviews. This game deserves to be played with knowing basically nothing about it. Here's the logline. I think it is the best game on any PlayStation console ever. And that's quite a strong thing to say. So if hearing that you don't go, aye, well, maybe it's worth seeing it, just do it. I would have been heartbroken had, obviously there were some spoilers on Twitter. Thankfully, we've had the game for about 3 weeks at this point, and I was well past the point of those spoilers. But yeah, Aaron, talk about the surprises without mentioning anything about
any of the surprises. Yeah, I think for one, it's wild the fact that we got this early, yet we were even kind of having to watch out for spoilers.
Yeah,
like that to me, like it's what I will say is this: like if you can just like play this through, because it is going to be so hard to avoid the spoilers that are inevitably going to get out there. I think this game does surprise in a lot of ways, and I don't really want to like compare it too much to say like part 2, because part 2 was so much of a like for The Last of Us, obviously so much of a different game from what we were expecting it to be. But it is, in a way, it's not just God of War again. There is a lot of ways that it evolves, and it just like changes in all these very good little areas, whether that's like combat wise or story wise. And I think the biggest and most vague way I could say, like, detail that is that it's just incredibly epic.
Yeah.
And like the first game is pretty big, but by comparison, or sorry, not the first game, the 2018 game. I get that all the time. People say that, but anyway, the 2018 game is a very like intimate affair in comparison to this one. I think the scope for this game is going to surprise a lot of people.
It reminds me of I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings guy, but it's like Fellowship to Return of the King. Like at the end of the Return of the King, everything is going on. It's the most unbelievably epic scope that you can imagine. The scale is massive. Obviously not going to say what happens in it, but I think this game has the best final sequence in any game ever. Like from the moment where okay, there is an extremely epic musical cue that Kratos creates that is just some of the best music in any game ever. But from that moment until the very end of the game, it's you cannot put the controller down type stuff. It is let this go on forever type stuff.
Yeah, this was the first game that I've played in a long time that was like a proper, right, I'll go off at midnight. All right, okay. Well, I'll go till 1. Oh, now it's 2 o'clock. Right. Well, I might as well finish this bit. Now it's 4:30 in the morning. I've not had a game that's just like caught me so much like that, where I was just like, no, I need to go on. I need to do this next bit. It just like continually pulls you in with all of these really nice, like, I don't even know if like twists and turns are there. There's like obviously twists and turns to be had, but like just, I would say like character. A lot of it for me was like character moments or situations where I'm like, I'm really excited to see how this person reacts to this situation and so on and so forth, because there's a lot of like groundwork Santa Monica put into the game with like the relationships, because obviously it's not a spoiler to say like we know that Freya isn't happy with Kratos.
Yeah.
She swore revenge at the end of the 2018 game, so it's like a lot of like, how is Kratos and Atreus going to deal with that with someone they still see as their friend? All of these things. That's just like, again, just like try my very best to tiptoe around like how to describe this, but I felt like it's, even if you weren't, I can see a lot of people maybe preferring the bit more of it, like the first game or the last game is a bit more of a linear experience in terms of like, you're out to spread your mother's ashes in the highest peak in all the realms. It's not as like singular a task as that in this, and I think for some people that might be slightly like, oh well, maybe I prefer the intimacy of that and the growing relationship with Kratos and Atreus. But I think here it's really just, it's incredibly hard to even deny that this isn't close to like a 10 out of 10 game. I think the lowest you could really give to it, and I don't know what the reviewer has given it like in its finality over on Push Square, but to me, like 9 is the lowest you could go.
It was,
and you would be nitpicky.
It was one of the easiest 5 stars I've ever given a game. Like, it's, as you say, like the thing about this game is, it's God of War Ragnarok. The stakes are Atreus facing his destiny. Will this trigger Ragnarok? Is it the end of all the realms? And it kind of plays into that in the sense that as you're going through all the realms and you're weaving into the main path, you'll come to the end of a main mission, and then a side mission will start, and it will very seamlessly just move you over there. But you can also still go back on the same path. There are so many objective like descriptions that are like, return to Sindri's house when ready. Like it actively encourages you to go and do other things. There are multiple moments where Mimir or another side character will say, we might not be here for a while, do you want to go and do this? And if you go and do those side missions, you get so much more out of the main story, especially the way it concludes. So it's a game that it's like power through the main story so you don't get spoiled, but also make sure you do tons of side stuff before you get to the end so that you're getting all of it.
The side stuff as well, I think, is far improved on what was in the last game. I didn't have a problem with the stuff in the last game, but I was far more like inclined to actually spend my time doing this or that, and like, because in so many ways with like how they've expanded upon like the explorable areas and the realms that you're going to, it just makes it far more inviting, and you want to know more of that, like the lore behind all of this stuff, because it's incredibly like dense, the lore. Because like, I feel like if you were a Norse mythology expert, there's everything that you encounter is something within the mythology, and there's a story to that relates to other things. It's really, really cool. And yeah, like, I was constantly at odds, I feel, where I was like, I really want to do this side thing, but we've kind of ended in a bit of a cliffhanger here. I can't wait. I need to do this.
Yeah.
And even a couple of times, like you were saying, like, it can be a bit more natural. I think there was one point where I accidentally went into a side thing without even really realizing. It just kind of naturally flowed, and then it came to conclusion. I was like, oh, that was actually a side mission, not even part of the main thing. So it's lots of, I mean, I could gush about this forever, because this, to me, is like one of the best games on PlayStation. I think even there will be some people that will maybe say, has this evolved enough from a PS4 game? I think, what do you think of like the whole, because it's still on PlayStation 4? Like, do you think this is in any way held back?
I think held back is probably the wrong term, but it's designed in a certain way that, like, there are the walk through the crack to get to the next area, which, to me, this is an issue with being like a poisoned brained games enthusiast, whereas we know why they do that, to get to like load to the next part of the level or whatever. I genuinely think, like, if you didn't know that, it wouldn't you wouldn't notice it. It's only the kind of thing that once it's pointed out to you, you're like, oh yeah, there are some like tricks to hide loads and stuff like that, which if this was a dedicated PS5 game, it probably wouldn't be out for like 3 years, but like they're theoretically wouldn't have that stuff, but that's like such a minor nitpick's not the right term, because I can understand people's frustration, but I think it's such a minor inconvenience in the face of everything else that's going on. Like there is no sense that this is just like, oh, we've like worked a new story into the same world and stuff like that. You visit tons of areas from the first game that are completely redesigned. Like it is, you can't just like work your way around Midgard, for example. Midgard, by the way, because in the preview I said Midgard, and that's Final Fantasy.
Terrible, mate.
I know. But, so yeah, I think if you know these things, which people watching this probably will, because they're like enthusiasts, you'll notice that. But I mean, this game looks unbelievable and runs incredibly well. Like there is no sense that it's being held back in any way. I played the majority of this game in the high frame rate performance mode, which went from like 70 to 90 frames per second, and it was completely night and day. I don't know if that's a factor of, I played the first God of War when it came out on the PS4 Pro, and I've only dabbled and went back to it. So this I remember the pure shitty frame rate of the first game. So this feels like this is like unbelievable.
I just finished my replay of God of War on like the PlayStation 4, but it has the PS5 update, so it's running at 60. I would still say that this is better. There was for me, it was like the tiny little details, you know, like if you're going around, there's a lot of snow and stuff in this game.
Best snow in any game ever.
The snow, like the way where you see like Atreus kind of going through and leaving the trails behind with his feet, or like the bits in the side, there was like the almost like crystallized kind of flakes coming out of it. Mental. Like that stuff looked insane. And then there were some sections of the game and some areas or realms that you go to where it wasn't so much like, oh, this is being held back because it's also playing in the PS4. I was just thinking, like, how the hell does the PS4 run this?
Yeah.
Because I would be incredibly curious to know, like, what it's actually like, because the level of detail in some of these places is just, like, on another level that I don't think we've actually seen on the PlayStation 5 yet.
Yeah.
It's just...
The only, like, it looks at times like the Demon Souls remake, like that is to me the kind of graphical benchmark of the PS5 so far, and it does hit that in places. And I think it's like, I think specifically the facial animations are unparalleled. The performance capture of Chris Judge and Sonny Suljic is just like, Sonny Suljic, it was an amazing actor when he was a wee boy, but this performance is like, it's so good, and it retroactively justifies some of the problems people had with like whiny wee bitch Atreus in the first game. Like it's the writing is so smart. It's such a like
there's the writing is incredible, and I think to balance, like the fact that it manages to balance these incredibly like epic moments with these really quiet little moments, especially like you know with Kratos and Atreus, and this is like a rare occasion. I've never really had this, but like, there was an odd time throughout the game where you get kind of emotional, especially like first 10 minutes. Yeah, I was in tears.
Oh, I was gone.
Yeah, and there's a bit, especially because we get towards the end of the game. There was a line at the end, towards the end of the game, that actually like I was in tears purely through the writing, and it is the first time that I think I've had that from like not just in like video games, but like I've never really had that reaction to anything in movies or TV shows or books or whatever, and it was on another level to me. And that's just like how you can juggle all of this where you're like weaving such a massive story but still managing to like tug at your heartstrings in the way that made this reboot. So I know reboot's not a word that some people like to use, but it's a reboot.
Although this game does reference the original trilogy much stronger, to the point where I thought that, I mean, this has warped my brain because I feel like I'm about to say something that doesn't happen, but I feel like that is like an anti-spoiler in the sense that it robs people of the suggestion that it would happen. So I'll just say
I know what you're talking about.
it seemed like they were going to do something that they ended
Aye.
up not doing because they talk about the first games a lot more. But yeah, it's what a game, man. What
If I was to be overly critical just for the sake
let's
of
do it. Let's calm down. Let's do it.
If I was to be overly critical, I think it veers on the verge of being too long.
I agree.
I think had you made the base campaign an hour or two longer, I would have been like, could wrap up, because there's a lot of they do a lot of things to help make it like. I think one of the things with the first game is you'll be climbing up the mountain and you're just about to get in the mountain. Oh no, this thing's happened and now I'm way down at the bottom of the mountain again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that and you're like, all right, here we go. And I think this does a better job of not feeling as back to square one, right, let's go. It's just constantly building and evolving, which is great. But I do think there was a couple of sections of the game where I was like, this could wrap up.
Yeah.
This could not in a way that I was really tired of it, but I could sense that I was getting there. I would have got there at some point. So it does always flirt with the idea of just being a little too long at parts. But I think that could have been through the fact that I didn't take my time with it as much as you did. I just completed it within the span of a week. So I just kind of went ham and I was like, right, yeah, I'm going to push through with this and get this done. And maybe that's why for the reason I was like that.
Well, I'm really susceptible to a bloated third act. That's something that really sets my alarm bells going. And I didn't feel like it was bloated, but I did feel like it was there was a few false starts to the ending. There was a few times where I thought, okay, this is it. Let's go, all guns blazing, and then it would take a bit of a reprieve.
Yeah.
There's a very dramatic, emotional moment that happens, and then because of how that impacts the other characters, you needed that time to kind of build those reactions and build the consequences for after the game. But it felt like it was okay, this devastating thing happened to us, let's go. But that didn't quite happen. But I agree that I'm so glad it doesn't do the thing where it's there's a moment towards the end where another game would have you go to every single realm and do something, whereas it's in one line Kratos delegates the mission and then it's no, let's do the real thing right now. And I was okay, that is very very well done.
I did think that myself. Because I was had that been a lesser game, they would have just been well, there's 5 hours of content, easy, and it's tied to the narrative, But yeah, I think though, it feels similar in the right kind of ways, but evolves in the right kind of ways, especially with the combat, because the combat is fantastic in the previous game, and this one, I think it felt more addictive to me. Where you would get, I had a couple of areas with some kind of side stuff where there was big bosses that were just, it would take me 2 hours, but it was that, no, I need to try again. I can't back down from this. I mean, I realized we're let's criticize it, and we're maybe that's that
mate,
bit, and then
mate,
back to complimenting it again.
Mate,
but
genuinely, in all of the time that I've reviewed games, I can think of less than 3 where I've had this feeling of this is one of the best games I have ever played in my entire life. And I think it's worth going in on that, because we a lot of criticism is very positive about games generally. There are so many good to amazing games, but there are so few upper echelon, and I think that's what this is. So just on the combat, it reminds me of the Arkham combat in the sense where it's the Arkham combat didn't hugely evolve from Asylum to Night, but it was still amazing in each entry because they just nailed it, and that's what I think that's like. And the boss, not the boss fights in a story sense, but the optional boss fights that you can go and seek.
Yeah.
Hard as nails, unbelievably hard.
There was a few where I was kind of late game, so I thought to myself, like, I just came across them and I was like, oh, I'll be well, I'm nearly finished the game.
Yeah.
I'll be easily be able to take this, and I'm like, nope, I'm just gonna have to. I'm just gonna have to come back later.
The wee skull icon that basically means you're about to get one-shotted. Like,
yeah. There was one of the fights from the side stuff that was like one hit, and I was down like full. Like I could be like full health, but somehow for some reason I didn't back down for that one, and I just managed to get through the whole one without getting hit. So very proud of myself for that one.
Very well done. I just patched that. I was like, I'll come back when I'm level 10 across the board with everything. Yeah, I'm just trying to think what else to. So obviously we did the previews a couple of weeks ago or whatever. At this point, this month has felt like a year. But
I know.
The moment that the preview ended in game, about 30 seconds later, something happens where I was just like, I need to text everyone that I know that's playing this game, because this was like, it was something that I expected to happen, but it was a moment where, when you're playing a game and you're like, are they going to let me do this? Is this actually what's going to happen? Is this actually what's going to happen? And then like all the UI elements fade in. When that happened, I was like, yes! Like this is, it was so exciting. Like the game's so full of super exciting, epic moments. Like it is an epic game. That is the best way to say it. And it certainly feels like it's a team that knows, like, we are realistically, they've said this, it's the end of the Norse saga. It's very possibly like the last Kratos game. I think it should be the last Kratos game. The circumstances around it make it that it's like such a fitting last game for him that I think that they just throw absolutely everything into it. And I already thought the first God of War was like basically a near enough perfect game, and I think this game is better than it in every way. Like that's
what I really respected the fact is that when they said they weren't going to do the trilogy for this and they were just going to make it to, I think when you play this game, although I've said like, oh, it's verging on being too long, the actual content that you get in there story wise, I would say like you could easily had made it like a 3-game kind of thing, but they've just went no, like exactly. This works better. So what? And what I would say as well is, I completed the 2018 game like a week or two ago, or a week or so before I actually started playing this game, and even then, like, it's making me want to play the whole thing again, like all the way through, because it's just this, and not like it feels different in a way, but it is part of this whole big storyline, and like you're saying, like it ties in some elements from the previous game, because like I haven't played the old games.
Yeah.
I played the majority of 3. I didn't like it. To be honest, I wasn't all that hot on it. Just the whole fixed camera angles and the slashing and stuff.
It's very of its time. Like it's very of its time.
It wasn't for me. Like I kind of know what happens with it, so I wouldn't say that you're losing out anything, because I still thoroughly enjoyed myself. But there are those moments there where you're like, oh, that's from maybe that thing, or we're referencing this.
It's not on that level, but it's like, it was a similar. So in the first game, obviously, when you get the Blades of Chaos, it's like this pure like yes moment. But there are like allusions to those. I say first 3 games. I'm pretty sure there was like 6 of that era. First 3 mainline games. But we should bring this around, because there's only so long we can talk about a game that we're unwilling to
actually talk about.
Which I think is the way to do it. I followed the spoiler guidelines to a T during my preview, and the comments in the last video were like, you've spoiled so much of this game. I was like, mate, it's been in their trailers. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think like it's a bit rubbish for me to say this now at the end of this video, but like, if you really wanted to go in without knowing, you are best to go in as blind as you can, I think, because you might be able to start piecing things together. And I think like I'm really bad for over-analyzing trailers and then remembering specific parts from it, being like, okay, well that has to come up and this has to come up and this hasn't happened yet. So I mean, there's things you could. I remember your review partially spoiled The Last of Us Part 2 for me.
Oh, really?
But purely because I just like knew all of this stuff about the game.
Yeah.
He said one thing and I was like, well, That's got to mean this. You know, other than that, you were completely vague about everything. But yeah,
I mean,
it
to
is
be
one of
fair,
those
that game looked like 6 weeks before I even had it. So like there was videos of most of the ending online before it even showed up. Anyway, Aaron, thank you very much. If you want to check out our content, you can head over to Push Square to see Aaron's videos. Push Square. Do you know who's reviewing it? Is this a Sammy Barker joint?
This is a Robert Ramsey joint. He's on
Scottish?
that one.
Is he Scottish? That's a very Scottish name.
No, he's not actually. No, he's
Robert Ramsey.
Robert, roll the R's. But yeah, he'll be on reviewing duties, and so obviously everything I'm saying here, he might completely disagree with. But
if he didn't give it a 10, he's a clown. That is my opinion.
Yeah, but
my
we'll
opinion
have
does not
review.
represent that of VGC. This is Jordan James Midler take. Anyway, check out my review on VGC. There'll be some more content when the game comes out, when we're not at the mercy of Sony kicking our doors down, putting bricks
Jim
through our
Ryan's
windows.
like pointing a gun at me right now.
Yeah,
just
to get the Leviathan axe. He's just like ready to throw it. Leviathan axe, still the best weapon in the history of games.
Incredible. With the haptics on the controller.
Oh, with the right, we need to stop. Right, subscribe to VGC. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.
Bye.